Hey everybody, and welcome back to Rock Video Rental. I am Brandon. With me as always is Caleb, and we're continuing on with our Halloween classic horror movie marathon. In this episode, we'll be talking about 1931's Dracula. With a little twist, it is going to be the Spanish version. It is directed by George Melford, and the plot for this one is centuries-old vampire Dracula preys upon the innocent Eva and her friends. So like a little bit of history here. So back in the day, instead of just dubbing over a movie into a different language, they actually shot two separate movies with different actors in the same scenery and released them separately. So you'll see like if you watch this movie, you'll see like all the same set pieces of the Bela Lugosi Dracula, which came out the same year, but we got different actors.
Yeah, I actually did not realize that before you and I started talking about this movie, so that was new information to me.
Yeah, I didn't know it was like that either until a couple years ago when James Rolfe covered it on Cinemassacre's Monster Madness. And like the whole idea just kind of blew my mind. As far as I know, it's the only Universal monster movie that has a Spanish counterpart, though.
Oh, here I thought you were smart and you knew this for a long time.
No, maybe just a few years. We have a special guest this time. We have Caleb's dog in the background.
Yeah, apparently there's
He wants to be heard.
Yeah, there's probably like some animal outside that I can hear, so he wants to be heard.
So I'll just jump into the cast here. We got instead of Bela Lugosi, we got Carlos Valarius as Count Dracula. We got Lupita Tovar as Eva, Barry Norton as Juan Harker, Pablo Alvarez Rubio as Renfield, and Eduardo Arozamina as Van Helsing. Some difficult names there for me.
Yeah.
Usually I'm fairly decent with like Mexican and Spanish Latin names, but some of those are a little different. I've never seen any of them before.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been much help, so
Yeah. So first time experiencing a movie of this type. I've seen the original Bela Lugosi Dracula a couple times. I watched it just a couple months ago because I have it on CED, and I couldn't remember the last time I sat down and watched Dracula, so I gave it a look. I guess we can kind of get into it here. Like the things I think this one does good. Not really comparing it to the Lugosi one, but the acting I feel like is pretty solid. Even though all the dialogue and everything's in Spanish, which is a language that I don't speak. I pick up a few words here and there just from high school Spanish classes, but
¿Por qué? ¿Por
qué?
Maria?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I don't very dramatic in parts, but I mean it kind of lends itself, you just did that joke, it's like telenovelas where they're very dramatic. But I mean this movie kind of lends itself to that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, it's still in the age of the whole theatrical acting,
Yeah.
So and just for covering bases and everything, I have not seen the American version.
Oh, really?
I mean, I think I've seen bits and pieces on TV, but because there was actually, not to like jump too far and forward and everything, but when Eva is being tormented, followed by Dracula and everything, I think I remember that scene from the English version, seeing it on TV at some point, because actually when that was coming up I was like, oh yeah, I remember this, and I was like, oh no, it must have been the English version. So but I did not see the whole thing, So it was probably like one of those like Halloween specials or something on TV where they were playing classic films.
Yeah, I will say that I've seen Dracula, the Lugosi one, a couple times, but I think I've probably seen Frankenstein more than that because that was always one of my dad's favorites.
Okay.
Frankenstein and the Wolfman, both. Um, I know my brother's a big fan of the Lugosi one, but yeah, this is the first time I've ever seen this one. But there's a lot of scenes like that that happen in both movies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, like you said, the whole dramatic acting, it's almost like play acting because it's one of the earlier movies with sound.
Mm-hmm.
Um, God, it might be like I hate to say that the Lugosi one is like the first movie with sound, but it's pretty close to
I
that
was
if it isn't.
I was actually surprised. I do not have a vast experience with movies from this era, the silent film and then the early sound movies. But I didn't realize that there was essentially kind of like a gap where you had silent movies that had music for
Mm-hmm.
effect, and then you had the sound movies that had audio but no music. Because there was basically no music in this movie except for the very beginning and the very end.
Yep, and that's how the Lugosi one is too.
Yeah, I did not realize that. So that really kind of surprised me, and I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, that was one thing I it kind of slipped my mind when I first started watching this, but once I realized it, like, hey, there hasn't really been any music, and then I remember hearing that um, even the Lugosi one was like that. Um, I don't know, like the the acting of Dracula, I thought was pretty solid too. He's creepy, but like in a different way than what Lugosi is.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. Well, obviously not for comparison, but he did do a really good job, Dracula in this movie. He his eye acting, or whatever you want to say,
Yeah.
um was pretty on point because there were a lot of close up of his eyes.
Yeah, and it's the same way the Lugosi one is too. It's just Lugosi had a like a colder looking stare,
Hmm.
and he's got that classic voice that everybody who pretends to be Dracula is
I
doing like a
am
Lugosi.
Dracula. Like what's his name?
I am Keanu Dracula.
I was thinking of who is it from Stranger Things? The the guy who died in season 2 or whatever, because he pretended to be Dracula. I don't know.
I don't remember now.
I'm dragging it out. Anyways.
Eh. I'd say the strongest part of this movie, though, is the mood and the atmosphere. Like, the set pieces were incredible for the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the shots within the castle, the spider webs everywhere, and some of the cinematography is really solid. The classic scene where Dracula's at the top of the stairs, and it's just like a really wide shot, so you can get a kind of feel of the castle that they're in, like the expansiveness of it.
Mm-hmm.
That was really cool.
I think the shot that really impressed me was right after Dracula moved and the two girls were talking at
Hmm.
their house or whatever, and they were filming them talking, and then they slowly pulled the camera back, and they had been recording it in the reflection of the mirror. And I was like, oh wow, that's a pretty creative shot. I didn't realize like they were doing things like that so early on.
Yeah, and uh, to get build off from the reflection in the mirror thing, that's it was brought in this movie a few times. Kind of vampire lore, like they don't cast a reflection, and just the way they worked around shots when Dracula was there to make him not have a reflection were pretty cool.
Hmm.
There's one scene that was probably one of my favorite scenes was when they're sitting in the room and the guy opens the cigarette box and it's got a mirror inside it,
Yeah.
and he like looks quick and like Dracula is not standing there and he turns around and he's there, and it's kind of when it dawns on him, and then he like tries to call him out and he's like, "There's no reflection, like show it again," and um, just I don't know the way they angled it, but still
Hmm.
kind of made it look like seamless. Like you know what they're doing if you know that's what they're doing with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the way that was handled was really good, especially for the time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, especially like if back then people wouldn't know that trick watching the
Hmm.
movie. So,
Yeah, I would say my biggest fault with the movie, we kind of touched on the lack of music that kind of takes away from the atmosphere a little bit, but at the same time, like sometimes the silence in it is creepy,
hmm.
and then other times it just kind of stands out. It's like, okay, is somebody gonna say something? Like this is dead air.
Yeah. No, that kind of goes back to when we were talking in the last episode about how sometimes I appreciate classic horror movies more because the creepy element
Hmm.
and that non-music at different points is one of those a prime example of that. Just as you said, sometimes it worked in their favor and other times you're just kind of like, okay, this is awkward.
Yeah, when Dracula and somebody else are having like a stare down and it's just silent, there's no music. Neither one of them saying anything, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, I think I think the best example of that would actually be I it I would probably say it's the part that stuck out the most to me as awkward. I actually kind of laughed when it happened, but when Van Helsing, which I totally did not realize he was going to be in this movie, but Dracula was trying to take control of him and I don't know, kill him, do something. And then essentially Van Helsing was pretending to listen and he
Hmm.
pulled out the crucifix. And
Yeah.
then when he like shoved it in Dracula's face, there was this awkward cry of distress from Dracula. And it was just instant though. It wasn't like how would I say, like a long suffering kind of like, oh well, you have the crucifix on me, I'm in pain and I can't handle it. It was just very instantaneous, almost like someone pricked him with a needle.
It's just like, ouch.
Yeah, and then it was silent, like Van Helsing then just follows him around with the crucifix until he leaves, and it was just like, okay, that was different.
Oh gosh. Uh, one of the lines that was kind of awkward that cracked me up was Dracula's like entertaining this guy, and he's like having a glass of wine, and a guy asks him, he's like, what, like offered him some, and Dracula's like, I don't drink wine. It made me laugh. It made me think of Austin Powers, where he's like, I don't bite hard.
Oh man. Yeah, that was another interesting part. Well, that was kind of cool though too, because there was a total throwback to Nosferatu,
Hmm.
where the guy cut himself, and then there's the whole like conversation back and forth about the blood and everything. So, which of course is awkward in both movies.
Yeah, there's a couple mentions of Nosferatu as well,
Hmm. Yeah.
towards the beginning of it, which I thought was kind of interesting because I don't think that's even referenced in the American one
Oh, okay.
or the English language one. Uh, Another thing I noticed too, so this movie was made in 1931, and it's the biggest difference I noticed with, Spanish language morals and, the morals of like English speaking people at the time.
Hmm.
There's a part where, was it Eva that gets like in a trance by Dracula, and she's wearing like this white dress, it's low cut,
Yeah.
and the dress is kind of sheer, and you can see her nipples through the dress. And this is 1931.
Oh man.
Like I was watching this while I was like working the one day, and I ended up watching it twice so I could pay attention more to the credits, or like in the not the credits, but the closed captioning.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I could figure out what they're saying and everything, the captions. But yeah, I just happened to like look up and like I did a double take, and I'm like, wait a minute, this movie's from 1931. That's pretty scandalous.
I feel like I could be wrong because I've only seen it once, maybe twice, but I feel like Metropolis um was a little quote unquote racy for how early that was.
Hmm. Yeah, I have not seen all of Metropolis, so you got me beat there.
But yeah, no, it was I do remember that, and I was kind of thinking and wondering the same thing. I was just kind of like, man, I don't know how much they were doing that in cinema at the time, but
Yeah.
more about kind of performances. Eva did really well. I kind of thought that she was a little flat, but then she went through her, I don't know if you want to call it like a transformation, and she became more dynamic. But
Mhm.
I do have to say that quite possibly the best performance might have to go to Renfield, the guy who went to visit Dracula at the beginning of the movie,
Yeah.
because he was such a buttoned up, put together guy, and then they made him go crazy.
Yeah, he's a straight up lunatic towards the end.
Yeah, and I was like, holy smokes, like I totally did not expect that from him, and so he really pulled it off.
Yeah, good call on that. It completely like slipped my mind. Um, yeah, like I said, he was like a straight up lunatic towards the end, just like raving. Um,
And that made a whole lot more sense because the again, that goes back to Nosferatu, like that whole idea. I can't remember the character's name in that one, but there was the person who went to go visit him. He essentially kind of, well, actually, I don't even know if that was the same character or not, but there was a certain character that followed Dracula that was supposed
yeah,
to be kind of a crazy character and everything. It was in Nosferatu and it was in this one, and it definitely did a lot better in this one.
yeah, no, I'd agree. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else I have to add to this. Anything else you have for this before I get to trivia and stuff?
Um, talked about the different performances.
How about all the
Settings.
talk with the scientist?
Yeah, right.
Try to figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the advancements in the 30s. I love how I think one of my favorite moments was they were talking about things and then Van Helsing said something about like, oh, people just like going through life being distracted and not focusing on the things of science or something like that.
Yeah,
And I was just like, dude, you're talking in the 30s. Like, why don't you tack on 100 years and see what it's like now?
yeah. Uh, it's like you have no idea what you're in. You're in for here, buddy. Oh gosh, yeah, that's hilarious. Um, and I know you said something before too about how the scientists are instantly think it's got to be vampires doing all
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Like, there's no logical excuse you can have now. Vampires, straight up vampires.
Okay. All right. Vampire sounds good. Let's go with that. Yeah.
Uh,
But I think that's it for me. So let's hit up trivia.
all right. So, for decades, the only surviving print, while it was in mint condition, was missing several minutes worth of material that encompassed Renfield's seduction by Dracula's brides and the voyage to England. The lost reel was eventually located in Cuba, of all places,
Hmm.
and has been restored to complete the film as much as possible. Though much more worn and aged than the rest of the film, the additional footage differs strikingly from the English language Dracula, probably more so than any other part of the film.
Okay.
So, Carla Lamel and the hunchback dwarf John George are the only actors with speaking parts in both the English and Spanish versions.
Hmm.
When Van Helsing is explaining about the vampires to a group of clustered around the desk, George says Nosferatu. He is on the extreme right in the Spanish version and on the left in the English version.
Okay.
Carla Lamel was the coach passenger reading from the tour guide in both versions, the first words spoken in the film.
Oh yeah, we totally didn't talk about how insane the carriage ride was.
Yeah, like how bumpy it was.
Oh my gosh, dude, I almost got sick watching it because I was thinking about what it would be like, and I was like, oh, that'd be
Shaky
awful.
cam. That's what it made me think of. Uh, so the director of this, George Melford, did not speak or understand a bit of Spanish.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so that was kind of interesting.
Well, for the language barrier, they did a pretty good job.
Yeah. So the Spanish language version runs nearly a half hour longer than the English language version of Dracula. And when they shot this, the English language one was shot during the day, and the Spanish one was shot during the night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Which I mean, for a horror movie and a vampire movie, it seems like they would have switched those around. Like they'd want the English one to be shot at night and not the Spanish for all the nighttime scenes.
Yeah, I'm not even sure how they would accomplish that. I mean, with the technology of the time and the lighting.
Yeah, I have no idea. But that is what I have. I don't even think I couldn't even find like box office and stuff for it, which isn't like too surprising, I suppose.
How dare you? Failure.
If the hell, yeah. Dracula. Yeah, we can get into grades. I pulled from IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. What do you think of those are?
I do know that this is a classic. Both the English and the Spanish version are usually highly thought of. So 8.2 for IMDb.
It is a 7.1.
What the poopsicle? Okay. Rotten Tomato critic 80%.
The Rotten Tomato critic is 100%.
Holy crap, what the heck? Have you ever had
Yeah.
that?
I don't know if you've ever had that.
Looking at our list real quick, the first one that's closest is 95% Creed.
Wow.
96 Halloween. Oh, 100% the Terminator. There you go.
Rock. The
Interesting.
Terminator in Spanish Dracula.
Spanish Terminator.
Starring Antonio Banderas.
Dude, that would be so interesting if they did that today.
Dude. Spanish Mexican Terminator starring Danny Trejo.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
El Terminatro. That'd be great.
Dude,
Audience though. You didn't get audience.
yeah, sorry, the audience. 95%.
74.
Holy smokes, that
Yeah,
dropped.
big difference. It's kind of surprise.
Stupid audience. I think I went first last time, so do you want to go first?
Yeah, well. Like I said, I've seen the English language one a few times, not a whole bunch, maybe like 2 or 3. I don't know. This one, to compare it, it's it's interesting the differences, and it's almost like you're watching a bizarro version of the English one, because that's by far the more famous. But I think the whole thing is fascinating how they shot just two different movies on the same set pieces, just in different parts of the day, and they couldn't just like dub it over. I mean, it seems like a whole lot of extra work to me.
Hmm.
And maybe the technology wasn't there to dub at the time. I don't know, or no one thought of it. It's fascinating to me. There's a lot of things in this I thought were done really well. So the acting, the cinematography, the atmosphere is amazing. The set pieces are great, and the lack of music at times added to the atmosphere and the creepiness, and then at other times it just felt a little awkward. The pacing's a little slow for me to like watch this too much, and I'm probably gonna watch the English language one more just because it's a half hour shorter.
Hmm.
I really need to go back and like compare or like look online to see comparisons and differences between these two movies, because I wonder what was added to have another half hour into this.
Yeah.
Um, but at the end of the day, I enjoyed the movie and it's really well done. It was kind of cool seeing like a different version of a classic. And this one actually, when MGM were like when they were releasing, or Universal, I mean, were releasing their monster movies on VHS. This actually got a VHS release that you could buy in the United States. So
All
that
right.
goes to show like how it's um regarded. I mean, the 100% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes is a kind of a side of that too. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and you know, the fact that I had to read subtitles the whole time, like that also hinders how much I'm gonna watch it. So I had to knock it down to a 4 out of 5.
Oh my gosh. Such a hater.
Eh.
Well, yeah, I enjoyed it. It was entertaining first time watch for me. Um it was more watchable than Nosferatu. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it I mean, that's just a bit of a barrier that you're going through with the silent film era. And well, this one was uh had captions and everything. You didn't have to wait. Gosh, man, I can't. It was like 15 minutes in between like dialogue sometimes in Nosferatu.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, filming was great. There were some downtimes and everything, but it was I don't think it was really detrimental um at all really to the film. I feel like I could easily watch it again. Probably will at some point in time, maybe come October and all that. But yeah, I feel like they did a good job with the story. It was interesting to see them bring characters together. I thought it was really cool to see the similarities with some of the elements from Nosferatu. I mean, since obviously that's what this is derives from. Performances were great. I can't really comment on the soundtrack because there was no soundtrack. But man, I think I'm going to. I think I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5 as well. Um, I think kind of the part that, man, I don't know. I'm stuck between 4 and 4.5 because it does seem like such a classic. I mean, I can't really say too much because again, I will be completely straightforward. I'm not super well versed with movies in this era. But it's well done. They do a lot of things well. The interesting thing that I noticed between this and Nosferatu was that I feel like Nosferatu did more um attempts with special effects.
Hmm.
You know, the whole thing where he rose out of the coffin, and then also how he would disappear and reappear.
Yeah.
They didn't really do that in this. Like, they didn't really do any outside of the whole like not appearing in the mirror. There wasn't any real like special effects camera tricks.
Yeah. Not really. There's just kind of like he turns into a bat.
Yeah. And even then you don't really see any kind of transition. It's just kind of like he's there, and then they turn the camera, and then you go back, and then there's a bat instead of him.
Yeah, and in the English one, he also turns into a wolf, I believe.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think I'm pretty good at 4, where it's just where it's well done, it's really good and everything, but yeah, I think kind of because of this whole theme this month, and kind of having Nosferatu in the last episode, being like, what, we're almost 10 years later, and they didn't do as much or even more with some of the film and cinematography tricks. So I'm good with putting it at 4 out of 5.
Rock. On the same page. So it'll be
Dracula.
interesting. Rockula, yes.
How
Count
did we go?
Rockula.
How did we go this whole episode until the end before we said that?
Right? There's actually a movie called Rockula,
Oh my gosh! I think we
believe it or
talked about
not.
that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so we'll be continuing on with the Universal monster movies. And we'll be talking about Frankenstein, a movie I mentioned earlier. I feel like I watched this one not too long ago too, and I also watched it on my CD player because I have it.
Nice.
This one I've seen quite a bit more than Dracula, just because I mentioned it's one of my dad's favorite movies when he was a kid. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to talk about that and get into it. A certifiable classic. So, until then, as always, be kind and rewind.